Hello, thank you all for joining us for today's session, interview prep. This is Malaz with Jumpstart Refugee Talent. Jumpstart Refugee Talent is a refugee-led nonprofit organization. Founded in 2016, we exclusively work with newly settled refugees by really focusing on their economic empowerment and inclusion, and by facilitating meaningful employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. Please visit our site to learn more about how we can support you with career readiness and employment support. So today's topic is interview preparation. I'm going to lead the first session and give you some general tips, and then following me will be Vanya, our expert speaker, who's an HR expert, and we'll give you some more interview preparation tips and talk to you a bit more about the hiring process and how it works with employers. So why is interview preparation important? It's a big part of obviously securing meaningful employment. It's already very difficult to secure an interview. You're competing with dozens, if not hundreds of candidates. So this is really, you're getting to the final stages of consideration. And if you want to be successful, you really need to do a lot of preparation. Preparation is the key to success. And that's no different from being able to have a successful interview and ultimately secure meaningful employment. Preparation really starts before the interview even really begins. And the first thing I always tell people is you really need to get to know the organization. Nothing impresses an HR professional more than somebody who's done their homework, understands the company, and is able to talk about the company. It shows that you're really interested in working with them. And that you're thoughtful, you're considerate, and that for you, it's not just a job, it's about you wanting to really work with this company. And the best place to do that, honestly, is just reviewing their website. And I'm not talking about just going to the homepage, but literally going through all their pages, looking at their programs, the different products or services that they might offer. If it's a publicly traded company, go through their annual reports. It talks about their strategy, their competitors, their approaches and tactics. Really, you want to make sure that you really understand that company. So when the interview comes and you're able to talk about some of the things that you've observed or that you've seen that the company is doing, again, that really shows the hiring manager or HR person that you really want to work for them, and it helps you stand out. I would say all the interviews I've conducted, less than a quarter of people have really shown me that they've done their homework, have researched my organization, and inspire that confidence that they really want to work for us. Second thing is, in learning about the company, don't just learn what they're hiring for this position. Look at all that, go to their job board, look at their other job postings, really to get a sense of where's the company at, what kind of people are they looking for in general. So you can really understand, kind of how hiring is working at this organization and what their needs are. And, beyond just studying the company, you also then need to really deep dive and study the job description. A lot of folks I'll talk to, they would have read the job description once. Okay, everything's good. I meet it. They apply, and then they forget about the job description. You need to go back and study that, before your interview. Make sure that you meet the requirements and ask yourselves, how well do you fit the job description? If they're saying that customer service is important, if they're saying managing a team is important, if they're saying managing a project is important, well, how much of that experience do you have? And how much are you able to talk about those skills, abilities, or qualities that you have that can benefit the organization and meet the requirements or meet the needs of the company? You really got to make sure that you fit really well, so that you're able to make a direct connection between your abilities and what the company is looking for. Going into an interview, you really need to think and ask yourself, what are they going to ask me? And start preparing answers in advance before you even get to that interview. Well, I always hear, I don't have an idea. How am I supposed to prepare responses? I don't know what the questions are going to ask me. Truth is, you can learn a lot about the questions just by reading the job description. If they're, project management's important, they're going to ask you questions about project management. If it's sales, if it's customer service, if it's, web development, You need to, if it's about working with others, or being in a team environment, working with clients, you need to think about stories from your past, experiences that you've had from your history that demonstrate your expertise. The best way to show, your expertise, in my opinion, is to storytell. At the end of the day, that's how we respond best, is by telling and listening to stories. It's not necessarily, lots of data and information. And they would have had a lot of that data and information from looking at your resume. Now's the time to start telling stories so that you can really make those experiences come to life, and the employer can really understand what that work history was like, and how it would be beneficial for them to gain from your past experiences. I usually say stories should be around 30 seconds to 2 minutes long, no more than that. And you really want to prepare anywhere from 2 to 5 stories. And every story is, or the stories that you prepare will be different, depending on the organization you're interviewing with, depending on the position, depending on the questions being asked. But again, really look at the job description. And again, if they're giving an example of, it's important for you, you're going to be working as part of a team, you probably want to have an example from your past where you worked as part of a 6-person team, and what you did and how you worked with your teammates, and how that, and what the impact was, or how that helped improve, reaching the targets for the company, or made your staff more successful, or your colleagues more successful, or what kind of support you provided to them, or how that team, how you communicated as part of a team, what tools did you use. So again, think about that story so that, the employer can, at the end of the day, imagine you working for their company by hearing about the things that you've done before. Another thing that you want to think about is why you want to work for that organization. You need to be able to express that. Let's not forget that there's probably 2, 3, 4 other people interviewing for this role. You need to be able to show why they should hire you, why you're the best candidate, and why you want to work for them. An employer doesn't hear that you're looking for a job. The employer wants to hear that you want this job and you want to work with them. So you need to be able to express that and explain why it's valuable for you. Maybe it's the industry that they're in. Maybe it's the values or missions of the company. Maybe it's the work environment. I don't know. This is up for you to kind of determine why this. Maybe it's the right place for you in your career to resume and be successful. So again, think about why you want to work for the organization, be able to express that. At the end of the day, you've made it this far. What you want to do is leave your mark so that the person remembers who you are. You want to be able to tell your story. You want them to appreciate what you've done, what you're passionate about right now, what your aspirations are for the future. Make sure that by the end of the interview they really understand who you are, and again, use stories, prepare multiple stories, and have those ready for the interview. And in terms of the interview itself, once you're there, I'll give you some tips here. I'm sure our guest speaker will also give you some more tips. And I'll also talk about some of the, some tips for a virtual interview. But dress professionally. You always want to dress your best, dress for the occasion. Always arrive early. Make eye contact. I know that's even harder with virtual interviews. Try to look at the camera from time to time so that they see that you're being present, you're making eye contact. And take a moment sometimes to think about your answers. Don't rush or force it, because the last thing that you want to do is give the wrong answer. You've taken a lot of time to prepare, and so take a few seconds to think about, okay, which story do I want to tell? What example do I want to give? How do I want to respond? I'm always impressed when somebody takes 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to think about their answer before they respond, because it shows, again, that they're being thoughtful, they're being considerate, that they're really putting a lot into this process and valuing the questions that I ask. So don't rush. And it's also very polite sometimes if you don't understand something, or it wasn't clear to you, ask them to repeat or clarify a question. Again, you don't want to give a wrong answer because you didn't understand the question. So that's a very normal and polite thing to do. And find an opportunity to share and tell your story before you walk into that interview. There's probably, again, about 3 or 4 things that you really want to impress the interview manager and say. Look for opportunities and make sure by the end of that interview you had the chance to share those messages or talking points. In terms of virtual interviews, again, same idea, arrive early, but a few extra steps. Make sure your spaces won't be disturbed and that it's well lit and a professional background. I've seen people where there's a TV in the back when I'm interviewing them, and that's not professional at all. And I know it's difficult, with COVID, and a lot of us are home and there's kids. You need to find that nice secluded space as best as you can and try to ensure that you won't be disturbed, and just any simple background will do as long as it's not distracting. And conduct yourself just like you would in an in-person interview. That's the best advice I can give you there. Look, at the end of the day, interviews are about communication skills. Yes, qualifications matter, but that's what got you the interview. They looked at your resume, they saw how you were qualified, they decided to meet with you. But what you really need to do is to be able to, once you meet with them, is communicate those qualifications, communicate your expertise, show them, what you've done and what you're able to do. And again, I think, the best way to do that is to give examples and to storytell. And practice those stories. Again, you want to have those stories prepared, practice them over and over, prepare, learn about the company. And really, again, I go back to like anything, preparation is the key to success. If you really are serious about this opportunity, a preparation could be anywhere between 30 minutes to maybe a couple hours long. So make sure that you're investing the time to prepare, that you practice what you want to say, that you think about the questions that they're going to want to, that they might ask. And believe me, the more you prepare, the more you practice, the more successful that you're going to be. Rather than taking questions right at this moment, we're going to go to our next presenter, Vanya, who'll go through some more interview tips and talk about hiring processes, and then we'll take questions later.
Okay, so here we are. So a few of the things that we're going to talk about today. How does a general process work post-interview? The first interview rounds. And so first interview rounds could be a phone interview. It could be a video interview. So we'll keep both of those ideas in mind. Preparing for the second round of interviews. Second round of interviews can be video interviews if the first one was phone. Second round of interviews can also be assessments or case studies. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And the third biggest thing we'll talk about is preparing for writing a technical assessment or any type of assessment. I just want to preface my my presentation with I have different types of industry experience. Right now I am working in ad tech, media, digital. It's a little bit of technology as well. So that's a little bit where I'm focusing this on. So keep that in mind, but I feel comfortable it's relevant for most industries. So jumping right into it, I know that we already kind of talked about what happens in those first round interviews. This is a brief synopsis. We'll just go through it really quickly. So the recruiter, the hiring manager is going to reach out for a video or for a phone interview. If you're in a situation where they just call you, probably because they have your number from your resume, maybe you're not in a situation to pick up, maybe you're driving, maybe you're out with your dog for a walk. It's totally fine to pick up the phone and say, you know what, I'd love to talk. I'm really interested about this opportunity. It's just not the best moment for me right now. Can I call you back in 20 minutes? Can I call you back at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning? That's completely fine. If you find yourself in a situation where you're sitting and you have the time to talk, take advantage of that. Sometimes it'll help speed up the process down the line instead of booking another time. So if you have the time to talk with them and they just kind of give you a call out of the blue, talk to them. If you don't, that's also totally fine. There shouldn't really be a whole lot of things to prepare at this point. You're really just talking about yourself and your experiences. No one knows that better than you do. So the next thing, I know we've mentioned this a couple of times, but discuss the role, familiarize yourself with the responsibilities in the job description. It's really important. If there's anything you don't understand, ask the person who's going to be interviewing you. They should have an answer for you. The other thing is being prepared and asking questions. So it could be like specific questions about the role. It could be what systems they use, if maybe that's really important. Like we mentioned before, perhaps Python could be one of the systems they use. It could also be about the team structure. You know, how many people are in this team? Is it 17 people? How many directors do we have? How many managers do we have? So you have an understanding of the team structure, not so much hierarchy. I would stray away from conversations about hierarchy and just focus on structure. And then lastly, compensation. I put a question mark here because I feel like most times people are a little nervous to talk about compensation. You shouldn't be. The role, obviously, in the business who's advertising for this role has a budget in mind that they have for this role. So it's not a secret. You also have a standard of life that you have to achieve. So you know what your base or what your annual earnings is going to be. Ask them, what's the budget allotted for this role? They should be able to tell you. It's also good for you to share what your expectations are too. And then really lastly, just confirm with them, what are the next steps? Ask about what the recruitment process looks like. Every business will have a little bit of a different process. Sometimes it's phone interview, video interview, assessment, presentation. Sometimes it's just a video interview and a presentation. They all vary. We'll talk a little bit about the steps later, but yeah, ask that and ask when you can hear back. Maybe they'll say 3 days, totally fine. Once the 3 days is up, follow up, send them an email, be like, hi, my name is so-and-so, I talked to so-and-so with this person. I'm just inquiring about the status of this role. There's nothing wrong with that. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so how does the general process work after you've had that first interview? Maybe it's a phone or a video. So usually, just like we said, the feedback shared with the team. Sometimes it can take 2 to 3 days. Again, once you know how long it's going to take, you can follow up. A decision is likely going to be made to move forward to the next step, which is either going to be a video interview or an assessment. And I'll talk about those two separately. The next step is probably going to be booked within a reasonable amount of time. Ask when you could be expecting to hear back. If there's anything that you need to prepare, that's good for you to know, likely more so for the assessment than the video interview. But yeah, it's roughly within a week, I would say, but it's good to just know what their timelines are. Sometimes there's a search going on, and maybe it's not an urgent search. Maybe they're more so passively looking, so their timelines might be more extended. If it's an urgent search or something that they're looking to wrap up in the next month or so, it's probably going to be a little bit quicker on the timeline side. And then lastly, a decision to not move forward on that first interview round is also possible. It's likely due to the fit and the experiences just not being the right match. Even though perhaps you've only had one conversation, I would still say, even though they may let you know, we're not moving forward at this point in time, that's okay. Ask for feedback. How was my interview? Is there anything you see I can improve on? Use this opportunity for future areas of improvement. It's really useful. Perfect. Moving on to the second round interview, we're going to focus on video interview for first. So the purpose of any video interview for the time being is meeting more members of your team, putting faces to names, learning about their personalities. Because the reality is, and I know we mentioned this earlier, we would probably be doing most of these things in person. You're probably going to an office, meeting people along the way and saying hello. You get to see the atmosphere. You get to see a little bit of what the people are like there. Fortunately, not for every business. We don't have that right now. So this is the next best thing for video interviews. It's an insight into the team and what they're like. So the first thing prior to your video interview, ask who you're going to be meeting. It's really good for you to kind of understand the different levels of individuals who are joining the interview. The individuals should probably let you know who's joining the interview anyways, but maybe it'll be just your hiring manager, your direct manager. Maybe it's going to be a coworker. Maybe it might be someone you might be managing, like a direct report. It's helpful for you to know just the perception of who's going to be in the room, so you can it's just good information to know at the end of the day. Ask if there's anything you need to prepare ahead of time. Like I said, likely not, but it's really good just to be prepared overall. I know we mentioned this a little bit about, doing some research on the business. And basically the third point that I had here was research the company. What projects have they been involved in that you might be interested in? What LinkedIn, have they been on LinkedIn? Is there a post on there that maybe you thought was cool? Did you have a read through? Anything that stands out for you, mention it. And if none of those things apply, every company has a values, mission statement, vision page. Take a look at it. If you have any questions about that you can bring up to the interview team. It's just nice for you to kind of hear that you had some interest and engagement with their company and with their website. And the fourth, again, ensure you have a clear understanding of the role. So this is another chance to really clarify the role. Is there something listed about a responsibility that you didn't quite understand? Definitely you can ask what the day-to-day is like. You can also ask, like, What are the challenges that someone in this role could be experiencing? Based on the team structure, how is the team going to change? What are some future projects I could be working on in the next 3 months? What are the business goals for 2022? These are all things that organizations know the answers to. They're going through this planning for sure. And so those are interesting questions that you could ask. And then lastly, have questions for the individuals as well. It could be some of the ones I mentioned, it could be totally different. And some final tips about video interviews in this spot is, I know we mentioned this before, find a quiet space, a good location. Work from home can be a challenge. You're probably, with people that you live with, your family, maybe you live with friends. And so it's kind of hard to have that same professional setting all of the time. Do your best. The reality is that most interviewers, myself included, I'm also working from home. It's not ideal. I'm still going through the process of moving things around and setting things up. And at the end of the day, you just have to be patient with yourself and other people. And if you haven't already, again, if you haven't asked in the first interview, this is your second interview, you have another chance to ask about compensation. Just like I just wrote here, ask what the general range is, and they should be able to share it with you. So preparing for interview round, if it's an assessment or a case study. So of course, they're going to probably send through some instructions, make sure you have all the information you need. Clarify the amount of time that's allotted. Is there a deadline? Did they say 3 business days? Did they give you a date that they need to send it back? Be mindful of this, because I do know myself as a recruiter and in the HR team, I do value that, probably because there's a little bit of an ethics behind it. If we give every single candidate the same amount of time, it's to be fair and equitable in our process. If one candidate got 3 extra days than another individual, their quality of work is probably going to be different. And that's a little bit unfair to other individuals who have also applied for this role. So be aware of your deadline. You can also ask who's going to be attending the presentation. Again, like we said before, know your audience. Is it going to be someone you're going to be managing, like a direct report, or is it going to be your manager? The way that you're going to conduct yourself in the interview might be a little bit different, and the questions you're going to ask are most definitely going to be different from those 2 individuals. Clarify if any particular format is needed, PowerPoint presentation. I think both are usually pretty good to be used. Also, within your assessment, be prepared to make assumptions. Yes, you're going to get instructions, but you're going to be expected to leverage your skills and experiences. So the instructions might be vague, but that's going to be intentional. So make sure that once you are walking through your assessment, or presenting it rather, if it's a case study, really show your work and walk us through your thoughts. It might seem pretty self-explanatory, especially if it's written on the page, but sometimes a little bit of extra explanation from you, maybe talking about the strategies you used, different ideas that you might have went through to get to the thought where you are, whether it's research, whether it's through previous experiences. You can say, I've been in this situation 5 times before in a previous professional setting, and this is why I think this is the right course of action. So again, just walking us through it is really helpful. And that's what we're looking for to hear, even if you think it might be a little redundant. I promise it's not. Be prepared to have some questions throughout your presentation as well. Depending on the format of the interview, they may say, we're holding all questions to the end, in which case, you'll be presenting first and questions will come after. But some structures are going to be a little bit different. They're going to say, we're just going to jump in with a question. So, be prepared for that as well. I have had also experiences where I've been in an interview a couple of years ago and they said, we're not going to be answering any questions. I was like, oh, okay. So they just asked me a couple of questions and that was it. Not the ideal situation. And I really hope not a lot of people have experiences like that, but be prepared for a couple of questions. And then share your thoughts once the assessment or the case study is complete. Maybe there's something that you really enjoyed about, doing this assessment. Maybe it was technical. Maybe it was like based in Excel. And you're like, oh, I really like this type of work. Let them know. Maybe it was a case study and you had to do research for the first time on a different topic and you didn't know about it. Let the hiring team know, like, this isn't something that I usually have done. I really enjoyed myself learning through this process. I, just really excited to do this assessment. Sharing little bits and pieces of information like that is just really nice. And it's helpful to solidify like a positive approach to the general interview as well. So sharing what you thought was new and what you enjoyed is always going to be welcome. And then, like I said, many times already, ask questions, many different type of questions you can ask throughout the process. Okay, so preparing for and writing a technical assessment. Assessments can be different types of things. It can be skill-based. It's usually skill-based, especially if it's something in Excel or you have to be proficient in a program. So that's kind of where the approach I'm coming down from this. So Firstly, the purpose of assessments. I know not everyone enjoys them, but they are meant to showcase your skills and your experience live. It's a chance for you to show what you know and what you're going to be bringing to the team. Assessments are also going to help level the playing field with other candidates who have applied. So they allow you to show your technical skills that maybe are difficult to talk about in an interview. They're also unbiased and focus on your individual skills and experiences. Listing all the past experiences you had, maybe different industry, different workplaces, and then talking through all of this in detail is impossible in one conversation. It's your whole professional career. It's really hard to sum up in 5 minutes. So showing what you can do sometimes is way more powerful. And that situational assessments will allow you and the team to really focus on you and what you're going to be bringing to the team. The other thing that assessments are actually really good for, it's a snapshot. It gives you a snippet into the type of work that you could be doing. Maybe the job description wasn't well written and it didn't really match up to what the assessment asks of you. So now you have a better idea of this role, and maybe you realize, this isn't what I want to be doing. It's not what I thought it was. You can kindly just let them know, you know what, I saw the assessment. Thank you so much. It's not really what I'm looking for. I'd like to be considered for future roles and move on to other opportunities. Or you're going to really like the assessment, and perhaps your approach is going to be, oh, I love this kind of work. I cannot wait to get started. So it gives you a little bit of idea of what the actual work could be that you're going to be doing. Decisions and feedback after assessments can take a little bit of time. I know for my team, it's 3 to 4 days, which is not ideal for giving feedback, but it's because for our team, there's usually a couple of individuals in the interviews, and so it takes some time for everyone to gather their feedback. I would roughly say 3 days is on average, but again, if they say we'll get back to you in a week, then it's a week. And again, if the team decides to not move forward with your application after the assessment, that's fine. It's probably may not be the right fit for skills and experiences. This is not a bad thing. Simply ask for feedback and use this for areas of improvement for your next interview, for your next search. Okay, so really briefly, because I've mentioned different types of interviews, I thought I would just highlight a couple. There is more than this, but I'll just focus on this. So behavioral interviews, they focus on your past experiences. It helps the team to understand what or how you might behave in a similar situation. So it could be like, okay, have you experienced this and this? Yes, I have. Great, tell me about it. Situational interviews, a little bit different. So it doesn't just focus on your past experiences, but instead questions are more hypothetical and are probably going to be designed to see how you would react in a particular situation. So some questions where we like, tell me about a time this happened. How would you approach the situation if this was different? So it causes you to think on the spot a little bit, and that's totally fine. And it's like we said before, sometimes you just need a second to gather your thoughts. It's totally fine to say, oh, that's a really interesting question. Give me a second. Okay, I think I have a story I can share for you from a previous experience. So that's the type of question that those are. Group and team, it's likely 2 or more people who are going to be in this interview, a mix of peers and managers. And a panel interview or a board style interview, it's really just a group of individuals coming to a mutual decision. Okay, next slide. Here we go. So it seems like a lot of steps, and it seems like a lot of different things, lots of different interviews, lots of different things going on. Well, first impressions can be challenging and difficult in the best of scenarios, even if it was person to person. Now that we are doing this remote, there's a lot of barriers for challenges. Just like I started this presentation, I wasn't able to share, but that's okay. You kind of just have to keep going with it, keep a positive mindset, and just push through, and because you're hoping for the best possible outcome. I think also at the end of the day, like, there's going to be technical difficulties. Just be a little bit patient from yourself and the individuals that you're kind of interacting with. It'll go a long way. It'll go a lot longer than you realize. We're all individuals at the end of the day who are dealing with really similar things. And there's no guidebook. There's no rule book to like work from home, perfectly without a hitch. You're going to be with family. They're going to open the door. They can ask you a question. You just have to just kind of roll with it, apologize and continue your interview. It's totally fine. I know it feels worse for you if it happened. It's happened to me, so I empathize with that, but it's really not that bad. Having multiple team members meet a candidate is actually really good for having a well-rounded picture of that candidate. So one interviewer may not pick up on something that the other interviewer did. At the end of the day, that's what we said before with those group interviews. It's not one person who's making the final call about you joining the business or not. It's a team decision at the end of the day, and that's always going to be in your benefit, in your favor. I know we mentioned different interviews, but there is a lot of value to having different interviews. So different interviews are going to showcase individuals' different types of skills. So a phone interview and a live assessment, you're never going to get the same amount of information in both of those. It's just not possible. And so that's why it's really important to follow through the process, even if you think it's a lot. I know assessments sometimes get a bad rap. It's like, oh, I have to dedicate 3-4 hours of doing this research. Yes. But there is a purpose to it. It's because they think that you have interesting skills to show, and they're interested in you having to join their team. So there is a lot of value in that. And I mean, if you were just to have a video interview, it's almost impossible to have the same amount of information gathered. So there's a lot of value to those assessments. Lastly, the truth is that you're not alone in this process. As we all know, 24 of us are, talking about this and going through this. But not only that, there's probably 2 to 3 at minimum other candidates who are in the same assessment stage as you. Application wise, yes, it could be 300 and plus. Actually going through that interview process, those numbers are going to be a little bit smaller. It's really helpful for you also as you're going through the interview process and meeting the team to be able to distinguish, is this the right fit for me? Am I the right fit for the team? And that's what all of those individuals along all of your interviews are also trying to figure out. Is this the right individual with the right skills and experiences? So those are just some things to keep in mind, even though it might seem overwhelming. Okay, so here are some interesting questions on the page. I know we talked a little bit about interview questions, and I won't, share all these questions. Give yourself, 10 seconds to read it. Have you ever been asked any of these questions in an interview before? I really hope for most of us it's no, because we really shouldn't be asked these types of questions in an interview. If we go to the next slide, here are some topics that people cannot ask you, but here are some questions that they can ask instead that's kind of getting to the same topic. So here's a question. Here's an example. How far is your commute? No one really should be asking you because they can probably figure out where you live, and prior to you starting work anywhere, they really don't need to know where you live. But they can ask you, our office is located at this and this intersection. Our business hours are 9 to 5. Is this something you can commit to? So if you know that that office location is 3+ hours driving, do you really want to drive 6 hours something every day? Something for you to think about. If you know that it's 30 minutes, you can say, yes, of course, I actually live 30 minutes away and I'm very happy to go into the office if that's the situation. It's a little bit different right now, I know, with remote work, but it's still something good to keep in mind, especially when it comes to time zones. Just something to know. Another question that interviewers cannot ask you is anything about race or ethnicity. So they can't ask you what your race is or what your origin is. There's no time I can ever think of that where anyone's background or race is from is going to affect their job. I can certainly say with MiQ, none of the roles that we have are affected by individuals' background or race. It really doesn't matter. We celebrate people of all backgrounds, of all races, and we value them as people. We're really just looking at skills and experiences to get the job done. Another example is asking like marital status or children. I know in some parts of the world and in other regions, declaring marital status is the norm. It's certainly not in Canada for the most part, and I don't think it's in the US either. They can't ask you if you plan to have children. They really shouldn't be asking you if you have children. If it comes up in conversation, it's fine, you can talk about it, it's your family. Maybe your child ran through your video interview. Again, it's nothing that should come up. It really doesn't matter. And your extended family members are not going to impact you as an individual about your skills and experiences and how you're going to get this job done. So for the most part, those are those questions. I'm happy to share the slides, but that's pretty much my whole presentation. Yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting to share some of those questions and what people shouldn't be asking people.